Moving out of your house is already a super daunting task. If you add on top of that trying to set up your first or your next house as a long-term rental, then it's just even more to pile up on your plate. Well, in this video, I'm going to start to talk about how exactly to set up your long-term rental for success. So this is the first video in a three-part video series, so be sure to check back in the next couple weeks for the other two parts. In today's video, we're going to cover the first part of your long-term rental setup. So this is going to include how to determine how much rent you should charge, where to list your property, how to make the property look awesome, as well as some general tips and tricks on how to write your listing and what sort of photos to include. In my second video, I'm going to cover everything there is to know about tenant screening, tenant applications, all the paperwork you're going to need. And then in part 3 of this series, I'm going to talk finally about how to actually get the tenant signed up, the parts of the lease that you need to keep a lookout for, and how to get your first tenant into their house and set up properly. So let's get started today. If you just converted your first home into a rental for the very first time, then you're probably feeling a little freaked out. You're thinking, how am I going to know if I can find a good tenant? How am I going to collect the rent? What am I going to do if something goes wrong in the property? Well, today I'm going to address a lot of those fears, and I'm going to talk to you exactly how to set up your first long-term rental. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to price your rental, where to list it, what software to use, how to collect rent, how to screen your tenants. That one was just going to be a short overview because there's a whole other video I'm going to make about that one. And then how to collect security deposits, how to collect rent, and lastly, where and how to sign the lease and get your tenant moved in. So let's go ahead and get started. One of the first things you want to do when you set up your rental is you want to find out exactly how much you can lease your property for. Now, this is going to be very important because if you don't know how much money you're going to be bringing in, it's going to be really hard to run the numbers to figure out exactly whether or not you can afford to rent your house out or if you should sell it instead. I do have a calculator that's located right up here if you're interested to see exactly how I break down a rent versus sell comparison. But for this discussion, we're going to talk about rental pricing. When I'm trying to figure out what I can rent my place for, there are a couple main sites that I look on. The first one is the MLS. This one is super helpful for me because I'm an agent, so I already have access to the system, and this is going to tell me a couple of things. Very similar to comping out the price of a house, I'm interested to see what's on the market and what lease price they're looking for, how long it's been on the market, and any rental properties that have actually rented out in the last 3 to 6 months. Now, the other place that I like to look is on Facebook Marketplace or on Zillow, because this can give you some other valuable information. Now, when you're looking at these places, you want to figure out, for example, if you're renting a 4-bed, 2-bath house, you want to look for other 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom houses so you can get an accurate comparison for what you think the rent is going to be. Now, this is interesting because a lot of times people only look for what they see on the market, whether it's Facebook Marketplace or on the MLS. One of the things that I do differently is I make sure to look for things that are not listed. For example, if I'm looking at that 4-bed, 2-bath house and I see a ton of listings for $2,400 and a ton of listings for $2,800 that are all on the market, what that means to me is there might be a sweet spot in the $2,500 range where houses are going on the market and then getting leased up really quickly. So that's going to be kind of my ideal price range. Now, figuring out what you can rent your property for is all well and good, but if your property doesn't look good and it doesn't show well, then it's all going to be for naught. So now we're going to talk about how to get excellent photos of your property to make it shine like a diamond. When I'm setting up a rental property, I like to put myself in the potential tenants or the potential renter's shoes. I like to think about what are the amenities that I'm going to be looking for? What are the neighborhoods that I'm going to be renting in? Are there schools close by? Do I want a backyard? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? All these things are what I'm trying to think about when I'm getting ready to list my house on the market for rent. And by knowing these things and kind of knowing who my client avatar is, I can get a much better tenant in place who's going to be a great match for the property. One of the most critical things when you're setting up your long-term rental is to have professional photography done. I cannot emphasize this enough. When a tenant is looking for a place to rent and they come across your listing and it has crappy iPhone photos that you just kind of slap together and put together and upload it into your Facebook Marketplace listing or into the MLS, it's not going to look good. They're not going to want to move in. So I always, always, always encourage people to spend the couple $100, get some really professional photos done. These photos are going to totally light up the place. They're going to be using a wide angle lens and the photos are going to look phenomenal. And therefore, it's going to attract a much higher quality tenant. Now, photos are a big part of it, but you also want to start to craft your copy. So you want to start to curate the description of your property, and you want to do that depending on what platform you're using. For example, if I'm going to list something in the MLS, I'm going to keep the description fairly short and very professional and a little dry, because the people who are going to be seeing things directly on the MLS are going to be other agents who are helping a client find a place to lease. Now, if I'm listing it on Facebook Marketplace, for example, my tone is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little more casual, and I'm going to describe more what it's like to live in the property, because these are people who typically are not using an agent and they're just looking for a place for themselves. Now, if you're going on other forms of social media like TikTok or Instagram or whatever it may be, you're just going to want to try to kind of change your language just a little bit to try to attract those people who are going to be using that platform a lot. For example, I wouldn't want to use a lot of super casual words or any slang if I'm going to post my listing on LinkedIn, for example, because LinkedIn is a much more professional website. So I want to make my listing description even more professional and try to tailor it to the people who are using that platform. So at this point, you've figured out that you want to rent your house. Nice job. You have figured out how much you want to list your house for rent for. You have gotten your excellent professional photos, and you've crafted a couple of different listing descriptions to match the tone of the various places that you're going to list your house for rent. So now the question is, where do I post my house for rent? And luckily, there's plenty of places where you can do this. A couple of the really obvious ones are Zillow, right? Or the MLS, maybe if you have access to that through your agent or if you're using an agent. I also like to list things on apartments.com, because anytime someone's looking for somewhere to rent, they're going to go through usually one of these big box names, Zillow, apartments.com, whatever it may be. So that's a great place to get a ton of eyes on your listing. Now, on top of just these big box retail providers like Zillow and apartments.com, etc., there's also a lot of apps that you can use who also will promote your property if you upload the photos and the descriptions. So a couple of those apps that I've used before are Stessa, which is assets, spelled backwards, so Stessa, and also Rent Ready. That's Rent REDI. Both of them have individual apps for landlords and for tenants, and both of them are pretty easy to use. Now, while we're on the topic of software, one of the big benefits of using these types of softwares, such as Rent Ready or Zillow Rental Manager or Stessa, is that they also have a lot of accounting features built into them. So there makes it super easy to figure out everything at tax time and to send your tax preparer. What you don't want to do is just to totally do it all by yourself, collecting rent via, I don't know, Cash App or Venmo or whatever it may be. And then when tax time comes around, your tax preparer is going to ask you for some pretty specific documents and for some numbers about your rental, and you're not going to have any way to organize all that stuff. So that's why I always like to use either Zillow Rental Manager, Stessa, Rent Ready. Apartments.com, I think, also has an extra management software and tracker. So anything like that is going to be super helpful for you. So I would always recommend using the software like that. All the websites that I've mentioned so far and all the apps that I've mentioned are all ones that I've used because I am a small landlord, right? I don't have hundreds of units, right? I just have 4 or 5 units that I'm renting at any given time. So those are great apps to use if you're just renting out things yourself. Now, there are other softwares such as Buildium or Appfolio that a larger property manager is going to use, but these are usually a little too complicated to set up and just not worth your time if you're just starting out as a landlord. If you're a big box property manager who's managing thousands of units, then you absolutely want to have Appfolio or Buildium, or Doorloop is another good one. These softwares are going to be a lot more comprehensive, and they're going to give you way more reporting tools, and they're going to create client portals. It's much better for larger companies. But again, if you're just starting out, if you're trying to figure out how to lease up your first place, that's probably why you're watching this video. So all those big box ones are not going to be for you. So we're just about done with the first part of this 3-part series about how to rent out your house for the first time. So far, we've covered how to find out what your house is worth as a rental, where to list your house, how to set up the photos and how to get it looking great so you can have an awesome tenant who's going to find your place, how to craft the copy, so what your description is for the platform that you're using to help find a qualified tenant. And we've also discussed a few different property management software options that are going to help you keep everything organized for tax time, list your house for rent, and also that are going to help you collect rent and security deposit. So stick around for my next video where we're going to talk about the most important part of tenants of finding a renter, in my opinion, which is tenant screening and selection.